So my name's Keryn Hassall. I work as an evaluation consultant in Australia and pretty much always with government agencies. And I started my career as a public servant in a government agency. And I've worked across many policy areas from health and disability services to industrial energy efficiency programs. As an evaluator, I use evaluation theory, and I always try to combine this with ideas from philosophy and policy studies, organisation theory, and research in public administration, because I think all of these ideas together help us as practitioners better understand the issues that are faced in program implementation. And my consultancy work is mostly informative and process evaluation. I try to work closely with the teams that are implementing a program to help them think more clearly about the problems they're trying to address with their policies and programs so that they can have a stronger program theory and that we can collectively use this to work at how to improve the implementation and design of the program to be as effective as possible. And I also help with things like what we call craft skills in public administration, the broader implementation design, but also things like how do you design good forms and good paperwork so that when the public are engaging with your program, that you do that in an effective way. And so much of what we look at in evaluation is often the big picture, but it's sometimes the small picture, that a part of it that has to be right as well. So I try and balance those two perspectives.
Wow, that's interesting. So given the conference theme, evaluation in an uncertain world, the complexity, legitimacy, and ethics, in your view, what are the most pressing issues for evaluation? And how is your work contributing towards these issues?
Well, I think the pressing issues are probably different in different places. And obviously in Australia, the issues that we face might be different from someone who's working with the African Development Bank or a big European NGO or that sort of thing. But I think what I really like about the framing of the conference is this notion of uncertainty, which is kind of so visible to us now, but it's not really new. Like, as humans, we've faced uncertainties in different ways for a long time. And then drawing together the idea of uncertainty with complexity, legitimacy, and ethics, I think pulls up to our attention all the things that the evaluation field has been talking about for 60, 70 years in different forms. And so what I would think really is one of the most pressing issues is, well, there are two sides of it, really. One is about making sure the work that we do is useful, not just useful to our immediate clients, but to the public who are affected by the policy or program that we're working on, so that when we focus on providing constructive advice and we're not just making a report that someone will put on a shelf, but also that we don't lose sight of the history of the evaluation field and all the other times that people have had these conversations around these questions. Because I see in a lot of organisations, a lot of new people come into evaluation from another pathway, like they're trained as a health scientist and then they go to evaluate health programs, or they've come in as an economist or the like, and they're not familiar with the rich literature in the evaluation field, and therefore they miss out on the fact that a lot of thinking has been done around complexity and legitimacy and ethics and uncertainty, around how do we do that in a epistemically valid way that potentially people just reinvent the wheel, or as some Americans say, reinvent the square wheel. Like people just coming into this field of evaluation, recognising complexity, legitimacy issues and that kind of stuff, start from a blank, like they've got a blank whiteboard and they just invent their evaluation practice from there. And there's so much that everyone can learn from the history of the field and the debates that went on in the 1970s and the like. And I'm really keen to help us. Yes, so I'm thinking that we often talk about building on the foundations of past evaluation work, but part of what I'm arguing in my presentation at the conference is that some of our foundations are broken and we don't want to go and fix them, we want to make new ones. But we need to understand the foundations on which the evaluation field is built and the history of those foundations so that we can build the right new ones and don't just accidentally build wrong ones.
Yeah, would you tell me about your expectations for the 2021 EES online conference?
Well, I'm was really looking forward to going to Copenhagen and being in that space and talking to everyone and all the accidental conversations you have with someone who's in a queue for the coffee or something at a conference. But we don't have any of that. So I'm looking forward to seeing how we can still learn from each other and have these conversations across the world with the on the internet, and even if some of us have to do it in the middle of the night to participate, how do we keep the dialogue going and keep having connections with each other and keep learning from each other's experience? I think it's a great opportunity to try that and see how much we can have those, both the formal parts that come with a conference and those accidental parts of meeting someone who you really want to talk to. And the content-wise, I mean, it's such an interesting mix of things that everyone will find something that's useful to them. And sometimes it's worth going to a session that you don't know why it's useful, but it still turns out to be informative for you. So, yeah, I just like that great mix of things in a conference like this.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, and can you give us a sneak peek of what your sessions will discuss?
So my professional development workshop is called Values Literacy for Evaluation, for working with values. So my argument is that we spend a lot of time training as evaluators to work with data, to work with documents, to work with people, and we have methods for all of those that we learn. But now there's more of a encouragement for us to think about values and to work with values in the mix of things that we connect with in our evaluative work. But we don't have methods for that. And in fact, a lot of the methods that we have learned through social science methods textbooks are really unhelpful when we want to think about values. And so there's a stream in the evaluation literature that talks about engaging with values and being explicit with values. But it's been going on since the 1980s. And like there's this book that came out in the 1990s that gave us a way forward by very eminent professors in evaluation. And people who write about this stuff are aware of that book, but a lot of what's recommended has never really come to happen. And I think one of the key reasons is that our philosophical foundations for how we think about values are unhelpful. They stop us from moving forward, despite the fact that a lot of people do want to move forward with engaging with values. So not only do we not have any methods, we also don't even know how to think about the problem. And so my work really is about two ideas. One is about values literacy. If we want to work with values in our evaluation work, we need to start to get an understanding of what do we really talk about when we talk about values. And when I talk about values, am I talking about the same thing as when you talk about values? And if I talk with an economist, are they talking about the same thing as if I talk with someone who's a medical doctor? And so particularly in government, when you're getting people in programs that come from different professions, you get conversations that are very messy because everyone comes to it with a different understanding. So part of my work is about helping people to develop their own sensitivity to this so that they can start to see what's going on in those conversations, develop their own values literacy so that they can better understand the whole concept of values and how it works in the evaluation literature. And then once people have a better way of thinking about values, and I don't have a right answer, I think there are some wrong answers, and basically everyone has to do a bit of their own work to get themselves to be skillful enough that they can then come to the evaluation literature and the methods that are already there in the evaluation literature that when you understand values enough, you can use. But if you come to them naive with no real understanding about what values are or how to think about values, you will do very badly. So my workshop's really got those two sides. One is about becoming equipped to think about values and developing values literacy. Then the other part is, okay, well, with that, what does the evaluation literature and evaluation methods give us that we can use wisely with an understanding of values and how values function in society? And so it's 4 hours, 2 hours on the values literacy part and 2 hours on the working with values part, and hopefully throwing a whole lot of ideas at people, getting people to exercise their brains in unusual ways so that together we can think about, well, how can this knowledge change our practice, and how can we make better use of the methods and theories that are already in the evaluation literature once we have a better understanding of how to think about value.
Keryn, if you could give one piece of advice to young and emerging evaluators, what would it be?
My advice, as is often is to young people I work with, is to don't lose sight of the history of this field. Find out about the history of the field, find out how the ideas that you're working with came to be. What is their history? Why are those ideas dominant in the place that you work and not other ideas? Because these all come from philosophical debates that have happened since, in the last 100 years. And often people are uncomfortable about some underlying concepts that are in the projects they work on, but they don't have a language to talk about what makes them uncomfortable. And so by understanding the history of the field and the debates that have happened about whether evaluations should serve the managers of an organisation or the funders or the people who are affected by a policy, so those sorts of issues, as well as the history of the field that argues about epistemology, about how do we get good knowledge, what constitutes evidence, what constitutes good reasoning. There's been such a big change in philosophy in the last 80 years, and yet some of our textbooks bring us old ideas and teach us as though they're contemporary ideas. And so I think it's really important for evaluators to understand the history kind of in the philosophy of social science and how certain ideas have dominance in the environments they work, so that they can better understand the knowledge-making work that they're doing and how that functions, and to think about whether they want to change their practices. Particularly to do with these issues around legitimacy and complexity and ethics, that there's so much that they can draw on from the evaluation literature from years ago as well as more recently that can help them be stronger in that part of their work, and I think that's really important.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.